My name is Lutfey Siddiqi, and I'm based in Dhaka, Bangladesh, representing the interim government of Bangladesh. So here in Geneva, talking about the intersection of labour and trade, I think you said bridge, so there's a bridge or an overlap or intersection. I'm very conscious of the fact that within a small radius of where we're standing right now, we have the exalted offices of the ILO, the IOM, WTO, the UN Human Rights Office, WIPO, UNCTAD, all of them. And they provide the syllabus for what we're discussing here today. And when I say syllabus, I don't mean just in an academic sense, but also for me practically in the day-to-day, they provide guideposts, they provide frameworks, instruments of governance, and they really make an impact in socioeconomic upliftment in countries like mine. And so I really wanted to start by acknowledging their contribution. It's become a bit fashionable to beat up on multinational, multilateral, international organizations right now. So I want to put on record my gratitude to the work they do, and let's give them a round of applause. Almost a year ago, last year, the student-led uprising that led to the collapse of the previous government in Bangladesh was at least in part because of extreme imbalances. Imbalances in economic opportunities, in labor-employer relations, in the distribution of the spoils of trade. A complete lack of space for social dialogue, a lack of representation or consultation, and a trigger-happy repression of dissent by the institutions that were meant to protect. Not very many people realize that Bangladesh is by population the 8th largest country in the world. It's more than 170 million people, half of them below the age of 27. The average Bangladeshi is 12 years younger than the average Chinese or the Thai, 22 years younger than the average German or Japanese. Double the fertility rate of Vietnam, and more than double the density of virtually any country in the world, apart from city-states. Bangladesh also has a disproportionate number of young people categorized as NEET, not in education, employment, or training, and a frighteningly disproportionate number of graduate degree holders who are without jobs. Our people are our greatest asset, but without deliberate and quality governance, they're also our greatest vulnerability. The extreme supply-demand mismatch, the supply-demand dynamics of too many people running after too few opportunities can create natural choke points of corruption, strongholds of abuse, including in government. For anything worth having, virtually any service or product, this supply-demand mismatch can create anti-competitive practices amongst those who supply, and tendencies towards undercutting each other and accepting lower standards amongst those who are on the demand side of the equation. So it's a difficult structural imbalance to begin with. Now, Bangladesh needs foreign currency to buy both energy and food. We buy them from outsiders. And almost 90% of the foreign currency that we need comes from one of two sources. Who can tell me what those two sources are? Garments is one.
And migration.
Remittances from migrant workers are the other. These two make up almost 90%. In other words, both these pillars are based primarily on labor that compete on the basis of low wages. Not entirely, but almost primarily on the basis of low wages. Bangladesh suffers from what economists call poor total factor productivity. So In spite of tremendous potential, fundamental factors, I mentioned demographics, but it's also the location. It should give us tremendous potential, but poor governance, poor infrastructure, poor education, training have put the burden of competitiveness, since we're here talking about trade, the burden of trade competitiveness mostly falls on the shoulders of relatively low-skilled labor, who accept relatively lower wages compared to those in Vietnam, for example. So now today, thanks to the tremendous sacrifices of those killed and injured in last year's uprising, we have a historic opportunity to create a new settlement, a series of structural reforms that should put the country onto a much higher plane. The interim government is led by Nobel Peace Laureate, Professor Muhammad Yunus, and we are determined not to squander this opportunity. We've set up reform commissions on several themes. There's one looking at the structure of parliament, one looking at public administration, one on judiciary, one on the police. There's one on women, to take a gender lens through everything else, and there's one on labour. And it's important that we have a commission on labour reforms at the national level, on par with these other reform commissions. Because past injustices have manifested themselves in the form of restrictions on the right to organise, inadequate inspection of factories, conflict of interest where you had sitting ministers who had direct ownership of problem businesses, alleged misuse of law enforcement and or law courts to repress or frustrate union activities. There's an overhang of all of these that we're grappling with right now. There were deficiencies in labour laws, but more importantly, there were deficiencies in the implementation of those laws. A lack of transparency or accountability that reflected the overall governance context, not just in the labour world. But now we have a golden opportunity. We think we have an opportunity to rewire the approach that we can take to industrial relations. We have, in partnership with the ILO, embarked on a roadmap whereby we will have signed up to, by the end of this year I hope, we will have signed up to and credibly complied with all of ILO's fundamental conventions, perhaps the only country to do so in our neighbourhood. In the context of international trade, businesses are embracing this, not only for the social justice point of view, but also for their own enlightened self-interest. Many of our target markets that we want to sell to, they view inadequate labour rights as non-tariff barriers and would either remove preferential access to their markets or erect new tariff barriers if we don't demonstrate quick improvement. On this particular issue, there seems to be a rare consensus on the left and right of the political spectrum in the West. Meanwhile, we hope that the global brands that purchase our garments will continue to engage, not only in the rhetoric and in the process of improving standards, but also contributing to the costs of doing so. To put it simply, they need to pay more for their t-shirts. And we need to make sure that their words in Davos and actions in Dhaka are consistent with each other. Sometimes they're not. So to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, understatement to say that the world is in a bit of a vortex of disruptions and change, uncertainties taking place all at the same time right now, whether it's politics, geopolitics, technology. But in a world of such radical uncertainty, it's all the more important to be driven by goals and values and principles. These should form the lodestar, the North Star on the basis of which we govern and we lead as a country. And so for us in Bangladesh, we are conscious of the fact that we have a historic opportunity to refresh our structures and our practices of governance from which not only will we meet global challenges, but hopefully contribute to some of the solutions to them. So we look forward to, and we thank you for your support along this journey. Thank you, and thank you very much for your time.